The Dharma, incomparably profound and exquisite, is rarely met with even in hundreds of thousands of millions of kalpas. We now can see it, hear it, accept and hold it. May we realize the true mind of the Tathagata. Today is the first day of this 7-day sesshin, the first in January 2026. We're still rolling. And each of our sesshins gets deeper and deeper and deeper, thanks to the efforts of everyone coming to sesshin. When you are about to have a medical procedure, you have to sign some papers. And one of the papers you sign is that you understand the risks of that procedure. There's a list of several, usually 3 or 4. And the final one, the one that can take your breath away, is death. That is one of the risks of that procedure. Any procedure, really. Any surgery, any procedure. But then you can die in a lot of ways. And eventually you will die, whether it's from a procedure or just sleeping in bed and stop breathing, as my grandmother did. So recently, I learned that I'm going to have one of those daunting procedures, and I don't know exactly when it will be, but one of my students said, you know, are you anxious about this? And then quoted somebody he knew who said, I deal with my anxiety by doing zazen. Well, I've dealt with any anxiety or any other things by doing zazen for more than 50 years. Significant zazen, concentrated zazen, many sesshin, on-site working with a teacher, both 20 years in Rochester, at the Rochester Zen Center, and also at Sogenji, in-house for several years. And then every year I would go back for about 6 weeks and get several more sesshin, more guidance from Mitra-roshi. And then I also started going to sesshin at what became Tohoma Monastery when the Roshi was giving sesshin in the United States, which he wasn't initially. And that makes a difference. You go through all kinds of challenges in life, and they come up often in your sitting. And it's a time when they come up when people are often afraid that things are no good. They're not doing proper sitting. If they were doing proper sitting, they would feel wonderful, just at peace. That's not normally the case. And in fact, if you find yourself sitting like that, unless you've had 60, 70 years of concentrated practice, you better be careful, because that sounds like the cave of dead sitting, which Hakuin warned about. If we go chasing lovely experiences in Zen, we're not going to do the work. We're not going to be able to do the work. We've got ourselves distracted. When you find yourself challenged in your zazen, that's when you can do the work. That's when you can work deeply on becoming free. But beyond that, the student said, you know, aren't you anxious about this procedure? No, it'll turn out fine, regardless of whether I die or not. Most people would say, well, it'll turn out fine if I survive and I am healed by this procedure. But for me, after long years of zazen, many sesshin, and after 2 significant experiences, I can honestly say it's going to be fine whichever way it turns out. The first experience happened when I was 26 years old. And we had just returned from living 3 years in Burma, 10 months in the United States to study Thai language, and then 2 years in Chiang Mai, Thailand. My husband was a diplomat, a foreign service officer. And when I was in Burma, the health conditions were not super. The diet was not super, it was extremely limited. You had sometimes carrots, rarely onions, sometimes rice that was full of weevils. The meat was full of worms. So it wasn't that great, and there was no real variety. Salad, forget it. It didn't exist. And also many illnesses existed. Various different kinds of dysentery, TB, and all kinds of other things. My younger son and I both got dysentery. Somehow my older son and his dad escaped that. I guess they had healthier internal systems than Greg and I did. And when we returned to the United States after Burma, Greg and I both had symptoms of malnutrition. We went back to the Middle East, I mean not the Middle East, the Southeast Asia, 10 months later. In between, we had relatively decent food options. And in Thailand, the food possibilities were much, much healthier and much more available. And things went well in Thailand. And we came back from Thailand, and I began to have symptoms of what was diagnosed at the time as ulcerative colitis. Now, when you get ulcerative colitis, it's normally a lifelong condition. In my case, however, it turned out to be caused by the wreckage the amoebas and other critters that caused me dysentery had done in my internal system, in my GI system. And so in order to treat that, and also to find out what the heck it was, I made trips to the University of Michigan gastroenterology clinic, which took up a whole floor on a rather large building. It had a very wide hallway going down the middle from one end to the other. The hallway was about 40 feet wide, and I had a number of tests to determine what was going on. The first test was a barium enema, which if you've ever had one, they're not exactly fun, but at a certain point after the test, your body is trying valiantly to get rid of that toxic chemical, the barium. And for some reason, they had assigned 6 people for the procedure that day, or within that hour or two, and there were only 2 bathrooms available. And if you were lucky enough to get a bathroom after your procedure, you knew from experience that you were going to be there for 45 minutes or an hour. You would not be able to leave because your body was trying to get rid of this barium. I was lucky the first time. The second time, the procedure went much more slowly. It was a different lab tech. And so by the time they were finished with the procedure, and I went back into the waiting area, both bathrooms were occupied. And as the urgency grew for me, they continued to be occupied with no signal that they were going to be opened and people would leave and there would be an available bathroom. So finally, when I got to a point where it was pretty dire, I decided I need to find another bathroom soon. So I went out into the hallway in my hospital gown and my brand new shoes that I bought in Singapore. And the first person in a white coat happened to be a young man. I buttonholed and said, "Can you tell me where there's another bathroom?" And this young man decided to try to figure out why I needed a bathroom. I mean, if people ask for a bathroom, you would assume that it's pretty understood. There's a limited number of things that you're going to do in a bathroom if you're normal. And so he was querying me, and suddenly I demonstrated. It would have gotten me past in the Doksan room or the Sansan room, but in the middle of the hallway at the University of Michigan hospital, teaching hospital, filled with people, it was not what one would expect. But what I didn't expect was no embarrassment. The poor man, must have been in his late 20s, who had queried me, looked in anguish, totally embarrassed. And my heart went out to him. I felt his anguish, his pain, his concern. No concern for myself. It was a pivotal moment. Clarity, presence, and empathy for this other person who had, in essence, because of his postponing my visit to a bathroom, had caused the thing to happen. It was remarkable. Many, many, many years later, I was doing Zazen at the Rochester Zen Center. I had been accepted to live and train in the Rochester Zen Center. Many things had happened in the meantime, most of which had been painful. So I'm doing Zazen, and the schedule was quite intense back then under Roshi Keplo. Now, when I was a kid, I used to have recurring nightmares of falling backwards. And I would jerk myself awake just as I was beginning to fall, my heart pounding, terror in my experience. And it was a recurring nightmare, so it happened again and again and again. Somehow I managed to suppress it until I'd been doing Zazen for a couple of years. And then it started coming out of the woodwork again. Now, the schedule was such that we had almost no time for ourselves. And we sat late and we got up early. And so to be awakened in the middle of the night like that was not particularly helpful. So I thought, okay, it's just a dream. It's not happening right now. Let's see what happens if I stay with the dream. I don't jerk myself awake, and see how it goes. So I had the dream the next time, and I let myself fall, and instead of finding anything out, I fainted. So totally disgusted. I was determined that the next time I wasn't going to faint. I was just going to see the whole procedure. So sure enough, it came again. This time, I didn't stop myself from falling. I could see these huge, squarish, wet boulders, probably 50 feet below, at the edge of the water. And as I was falling, I had this profound realization that it would not matter if I was dashed to death on the rocks below or if I survived. There would be no difference. I don't know what happened because there was no need to continue the dream. And of course, I never had it again. But it was so freeing. It didn't matter whether I was dashed to death on those big square boulders or if I survived. And it was truly deep understanding. When the various religions say there is eternal life, and Buddhism also says there is no death except in what we think of it. And of course, the body's going to go. If anybody's seen a dead body, at least one that is fully dead, and the beingness of the person has vanished, you know that it's just a husk. There's nobody there. Of course, if you come upon somebody who's just died or died suddenly, who doesn't realize they've died or is fighting to stay alive, it's a different experience. But for people who really have died, there's nothing left. And you can embalm the body and pretend that it's still alive, or you can do a number of other things. Cremate it, do, what do they call them, forest burials, where you're simply wrapped in a cloth and put in a hole near a tree and allowed to decompose and feed the landscape. Whatever your preferences, and many people would feel anxiety around just even mentioning that, there are those options, but no option is there to continue leaving. You're not going to live in the same way that you've been accustomed to living. So then what is it that is in that body? And please don't call it a soul. The beingness of that person is transformed by what we call death. Who we think we are, who we assume we are, that's gonna go. And perhaps that's the fear that we'll disappear. But the energy that is the persona, the energy that is eternal, can never disappear. If you've ever been at a baby's birth, you know that infant already has an essence, a personality. Where did that come from? That baby was formed from the joining of two cells, which then expanded and eventually became a baby. But where did the little being, the beingness that is so alive and has such a personality right from the beginning of being born, where did that come from? So the big answer is, when people ask, are you afraid of, are you anxious? Are you afraid you're going to die with this upcoming procedure? And I said, no, I honestly am not. Because whether I live or I die, in the normal way of seeing it, it will not matter. Not in a glum, depressing matter, but in an ongoing expression of this life energy, which is just being transformed, however it's being transformed, whether dying on the surgical table or in a car accident or just in your bed at old age. The beingness is transformed. Mitra-roshi says, it's like taking off an old kimono. This old kimono you've worn for so many decades, and it's kind of tattered and worn out, and you're taking it off, and you're going to end up with a new kimono. That's his metaphor for a new life. But don't assume that there is something called a soul that is going to exit the body and then plunk right back into a new body. It's not the reality. Although many people believe in it because it can be less frightening, I guess. But the reality is when you let go of who you have to be, who you think you are, when you drop this self-image, then you're free to move in any direction, both in this so-called life as well as forward into whatever might happen next. So no, I'm not afraid. And you don't have to be either if you can get profoundly deep. And you do that through your zazen. That said, I'm not saying I'm enlightened. There's something called the long maturation that Toray Enji, who was Hakuin's earliest, I believe, Dharma successor, in his mid to late 20s. By the time he had come to Hakuin, when he was something like 20, 21, he had already had a deep kensho. And he just got deeper and deeper and more awakened. But he also felt very strongly that that wasn't sufficient. What a lot of Zen teachers don't tell you is that it's not about kensho, although that is important. And hopefully it's not about a single kensho, because the way the mind works, you have an insight, which is what kensho means literally in Japanese. And that can get, you can have deeper and deeper and deeper insights. If you have a deeper one, it's sometimes called satori. But awakening happens to be a much deeper place. And once you are on that path and you've had a single kensho, in fact, even before that, your behavior patterns can become known to you. They can become conscious. And many people at that stage of Zen practice feel like the practice is making them worse people, but it's not. It's giving them an opportunity to see where they've been caught in dysfunction and to release that caught place so that they don't continue that behavior further. And just the fact of seeing, of recognizing a bad habit pattern, a dysfunctional way of being, a nasty tone of voice, a way of saying things that you didn't really mean to say that way and weren't even aware of. When you see these things and can take responsibility for them. You feel remorse, you feel regret, you feel embarrassed. And that goes a long way to letting them go. Of course, there's more work that needs to be done. Not only that, but we all have lots of those things. Lots of those things. And working on them all the time. As long as anything comes up, to take it to heart. Yay, this is a way I can let go of that kind of behavior. Wonderful. Yes, it might be challenging. It may be embarrassing. But probably you won't be embarrassed, because by then you'll understand that there's an opportunity, that the regret and the remorse that comes up when recognizing that behavior is sufficient to put into place a kind of a stop sign, a blinking stop sign that says, when you're automatically heading in that direction, because it is a habit pattern, there's that blinking stop sign, and it says, you really want to do this again? And you have the opportunity not to do it. And that weakens it further. And eventually, it's not there anymore. And you're not acting in that particular way anymore. But as I said, there's plenty of others that are down there buried that one by one will come up, and not to bury them again is the most important thing. Not to, as John Wellwood said, make an end run around your issues. Not to try to put them back in the closet, or back in Pandora's box, back in the drawer, and ignore them. No, open to them. And through that process, let them go. And gradually doing this, and also seeing more clearly as a result of your zazen, you become closer and closer to what would be called awakening. This is the gift of this practice, and it is amazing because it can be done. We just need the courage, the determination, the faith that it can be done. And of course, it means bumping into all of our habit patterns that limit our assumptions about ourselves. I can't do this. I'm not good enough. I can't do this. I can't do anything. I can't do this. I don't have faith. Well, plug away. Keep eating at it. And before you know it, you'll be in a much, much more free place. So thank you for listening. We'll stop now and recite the 4 vows.